Okay. So now we are live everywhere. Welcome back. I'm Punyapal Shah, your host, and we have Jack today with us, and we're gonna read Laravel Inertia docs today. Let's see how it goes and how much time it will gonna take. But before that, can you introduce bit yourself, Jack?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Zack Warren. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. I work for a company called Max Connect Digital. I lead a team there where we build out a couple of Laravel applications that are internally used by the team, mostly to do with reporting for our clients' digital marketing efforts. So accessing a lot of digital marketing platforms like Google Ads, Facebook Ads, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, work every day in Laravel and Inertia. So very excited to read through the docs here and get even more familiar with a framework that I'm already familiar with.
Yo, let's let's see how. Hmm. Okay. So when did you started your like first code in PHP, and when you started working with Laravel?
Yeah, so I started coding in PHP around 2011, 2012. I worked for a startup that was building an ERP system for kind of larger manufacturers. And the developer there was kind of using his own framework that he'd built, from scratch. And I was like, man, there just has to be a better way. And I think I'm pretty sure it was pagination. I was starting to like build out my own custom pagination stuff. And I was like, this is pretty tough, especially as a newbie. And so I think I posted on Reddit and was like, man, how do you do pagination in PHP? And someone was like, you should just use Laravel. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went and checked it out, and that's the rest is history. Been using it ever since. So,
Yeah. So I mean, from when you are using Inertia, are you using in regular projects daily?
oh yeah, Inertia is definitely the go-to. I think I've been using it since it's been released. Like I just absolutely loved it from day one. And so, yeah, pretty well day one using Inertia.
Nice. I also want to start working with Inertia. To be frank, I have like really worked very less with Inertia till the date. Because I'm working with the tall stack, live air and all,
Um,
and even I am keep getting clients around live air, so I haven't try. I'm not much hands on with Inertia yet, but yeah, let's see how what I learned today about
sure.
Inertia. Okay, so I think let's get started.
Perfect.
Yeah, do you want to say anything before we jump into the Inertia docs?
No, very excited to get this going. I know it's been a while. I had to gear up, didn't even have like a microphone or anything. So I was like, I should probably get one of those. But yeah, excited to get started.
Wow, that is pretty interesting.
All right, we ready?
Yo,
All right, should we start with the homepage or just dig right? We'll just go right into the docs. All right,
yeah, I think homepage
introduction.
is really beautiful. Do you wanna like show them
Oh, for
if they
sure.
haven't seen it yet?
Gladly.
Because
Yeah.
we yeah, because even I just get a thumbnail impression from the landing page only.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty, I mean, decent.
Yeah,
Amazing,
very
really.
excited. I think we waited for the perfect time because they just redid like all the docs from the old ones.
Yeah.
And so awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so introduction.
Yeah.
Inertia is a new approach to building classic server-driven web apps. We call it the modern monolith. Inertia allows you to create fully client-side rendered, single-page apps without the complexity that comes with modern SPAs. It does this by leveraging existing server-side patterns that you already love. Inertia has no client-side routing, nor does it require an API. Simply build controllers and page views like you've always done. Inertia works great with any back-end framework, but it's fine-tuned for Laravel. Let's go. Not a framework. Inertia isn't a framework, nor is it a replacement for your existing server-side or client-side frameworks. Rather, it's designed to work with them. Think of Inertia as glue that connects the two. Inertia does this via adapters. We currently have 3 official client-side adapters, React, Vue, and Svelte. and 3 server-side adapters, Laravel, Rails, and Phoenix. Next steps.
Yeah.
Want to learn a little bit more before diving in? Check out who is it for and how it works pages, or if you're ready to get started, jump right into the installation instructions. So go here. Still good?
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, demo application. We've set up a demo app for Inertia.js called Ping CRM. The application is built using Laravel and Vue. You can find the source code on GitHub. The Ping CRM demo is hosted on Heroku, and the database is reset every hour. Please be respectful when editing data. In addition to the Vue version of Ping CRM, we also maintain a Svelte version of the application, which you can find on GitHub. Third party. Beyond our official demo app, Ping CRM also has been translated into numerous different languages and frameworks. Do you want me to go through all this? I wondered that about like code blocks. Do people
I
usually read
don't.
through the code blocks?
Yeah, of course. So, what is Ping CRM? I heard of it for the first time.
So Ping CRM is just a demo application that I think Jonathan Rennick, the official or the original creator of Inertia, built just to kind of show off like, here's how I would do certain things in Inertia. Very helpful. I would say like that along with the Inertia docs was like one of the most helpful things about getting started with Inertia, because you could read the docs, but you could also just see an actual implementation of everything. So yeah, I thought that was incredible for adoption.
Yeah, it's a good source of learning.
Okay, upgrade guide. That's not too bad.
You can skip.
Okay,
Guidelines you can skip, I guess. Do you think?
you want to skip this upgrade guides? Yeah, that
Do you
works.
think? I think because.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
let's go.
Server-side setup. The first step when installing Inertia is to configure your server-side framework. Inertia maintains an official server-side adapter for Laravel. For other frameworks, see the community adapters. Inertia is fine-tuned for Laravel, so the documentation examples on this website utilize Laravel. For examples of using Inertia with other server-side frameworks, please refer to the framework-specific documentation maintained by that adapter. Laravel starter kits provide out-of-the-box scaffolding for new Inertia applications. These starter kits are the absolute fastest way to start building a new Inertia project using Laravel and Vue or React. However, if you would like to manually install Inertia into your application, please consult the documentation below. Installation. Install dependencies. First, install the Inertia server-side adapter using the Composer Package Manager. Set up a root template. Next, set up the root template that will be loaded on the first page visit to your application. This template should include your site's CSS and JavaScript assets, along with the @inertia and @inertia head directives. For React applications, it's recommended to include the @vite React refresh directive before the @vite directive to enable fast refresh in development. The @inertia directive renders a div element with an ID of app. This element serves as the mounting point for your JavaScript application. You may customize the ID by passing a different value to the directive. If you change the ID of the root element, be sure to update it client-side as well. By default, Inertia's Laravel adapter will assume your root template is named app.blade.php. If you would like to use a different root view, you can change it to using Inertia set root view method. Register middleware. Next, we need to set up the Inertia middleware. You can accomplish this by publishing the handle Inertia request middleware to your application, which can be done using the following artisan command. Once the middleware has been published, append the handle Inertia request middleware to the web middleware group in your application's bootstrap/app.php file. This middleware provides a version method for setting your asset version, as well as a share method for defining shared data. Create your first response. That's it. You're all ready to go server side. Now you're ready to start creating Inertia pages and rendering them via responses.
Sorry to interrupt. I guess the window is getting a bit blurred, I guess. Is it like, okay, now it's fine.
The window is here?
Yeah, I think it was bit internet glitch or something like that, I guess. I don't know. Now it's fine.
Gotcha.
Let's go ahead.
Okay. I'll try and just scroll and then stop, so maybe it'll pull back into focus.
Yeah.
Okay, client-side setup. Once you have your server-side framework configured, you then need to set up your client-side framework. Inertia currently provides support for React, Vue, and Svelte. Laravel starter kits. We kind of already went through this. Laravel starter kits provide out-of-the-box scaffolding for new Inertia applications. We'll just go down to installation. So installation, install dependencies. First, install the Inertia client-side adapter corresponding to your framework of choice. Initialize the Inertia app. Next, update your main JavaScript file to boot your Inertia app. To accomplish this, we'll initialize the client-side framework with the base Inertia component. The setup callback receives everything necessary to initialize the client-side framework, including the root Inertia app component. Configuring defaults. You may pass a defaults object to the create Inertia app to configure default settings for various features. You don't have to pass a default for every key, just the ones you want to tweak. The visit options callback receives the target URL and the current visit options and should return an object with any options you want to override. For more details on the available configuration options, see the forms, prefetching, and manual visits documentation. Updating configuration at runtime. You may also update configuration values at runtime using the exported config instance. This is particularly useful when you need to adjust settings based on user preferences or application state. Resolving components. The resolve callback tells Inertia how to load a page component. It receives a page name string and returns a page component module. How you implement this callback depends on which bundler, Vite, or Webpack you're using. By default, we recommend eager loading your components, which will result in a single JavaScript bundle. However, if you'd like to lazy load your components, see our code splitting documentation. Defining a root element. By default, Inertia assumes that your application's root template has a root element with an ID of app. If your application's root element has a different ID, you can provide it using the ID property. If you change the ID of the root element, be sure to update it server-side as well. Script element for page data. By default, Inertia stores the initial page data in a data page attribute on the root element. You may configure Inertia to use a script type application/JSON element instead, which is slightly faster and easier to inspect in your browser's dev tools. Be sure to also update your SSR entry point if you're using server-side rendering. Laravel users should also set the inertia.useScript element for initial app config value to true so the @inertia blade directive outputs a script element. Still good?
Yeah.
Awesome. Who is Inertia.js for? Inertia was crafted for development teams and solo hackers who typically build server-side rendered applications using frameworks like Laravel, Ruby on Rails, Django, or Phoenix. You're used to creating controllers, retrieving data from the database via an ORM, and rendering views. But what happens when you want to replace your server-side rendered views with a modern JavaScript-based single-page application front end? The answer is always you need to build an API, because that's how modern SPAs are built. This means building a REST or GraphQL API. It means figuring out authentication and authorization for that API. It means client-side state management. It means setting up a new Git repository. It means a more complicated deployment strategy, and the list goes on. It's a complete paradigm shift and often a complete mess. We think there's a better way. Inertia empowers you to build a modern JavaScript-based single-page application without the tiresome complexity. Inertia works just like a classic server-side rendered application. You create controllers, you get data from the database via your ORM, and you render views. But Inertia views are JavaScript page components written in React, Vue, or Svelte. This means you get all the power of a client-side application and modern SPA experience, but you don't need to build an API. We think it's a breath of fresh air that will supercharge your productivity. I agree with that for sure.
Yeah.
How it works. Sorry, do you want me to like pause in the middle of each page and talk about it, or just fly right through?
Up to you. So,
Perfect.
if you want to share anything about inertia in between pages, you can do that.
Perfect. Okay, how it works. Use the tools you love. With Inertia, you build applications just like you've always done with your server-side web framework of choice. You use your framework's existing functionality for routing, controllers, middleware, authentication, authorization, data fetching, and more. However, Inertia replaces your application's view layer. Instead of using server-side rendered via PHP or Ruby templates, the views returned by your application are JavaScript page components. This allows you to build your entire front end using React, Vue, or Svelte while still enjoying the productivity of Laravel or your preferred server-side framework. Intercepting requests. As you might expect, simply creating your front end in JavaScript doesn't give you a single page application experience. If you were to click a link, your browser would make a full page visit, which would then cause your client-side framework to reboot on the subsequent page load. This is where Inertia changes everything. At its core, Inertia is essentially a client-side routing library. It allows you to make page visits without forcing a full page reload. This is done using the link component, a lightweight wrapper around a normal anchor link. When you click an Inertia link, Inertia intercepts the click and makes the visit via XHR instead. You can even make these visits programmatically in JavaScript using router.visit. When Inertia makes an XHR visit, the server detects that it's an Inertia visit, and instead of returning a full HTML response, it returns a JSON response with the JavaScript page component name and data props. Inertia then dynamically swaps out the previous page component with the new page component and updates the browser's history state. The end result is a silky smooth single page experience. To learn more about the nitty-gritty technical details of how Inertia works under the hood, check out the protocol page. So I will say something about this. I actually got into using Bun quite a bit. I think we had an interaction on X about TypeScript and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yes.
But so using Bun, I ended up building like a full Inertia adapter. I couldn't find one that existed. And so I was like, well, I'll just build one and see how it works. Man, there's so much going on there. Like it's pretty insane the way that this whole thing is designed. But it's very cool. So props to the team for Inertia. It's awesome. All right, the protocol. This page contains a detailed specification of the Inertia protocol. Be sure to read the How It Works page first for a high-level overview. HTML responses. The very first request to an Inertia app is just a regular full-page browser request with no special Inertia headers or data. For these requests, the server returns a full HTML document. This HTML response includes the site assets, CSS, JavaScript, as well as a root div in the page's body. The root div serves as a mounting point for the client-side app and includes a data page attribute with a JSON-encoded page object. For the initial page, Inertia uses this information to boot your client-side framework and display the initial page component. While the initial response is HTML, Inertia does not server-side render the JavaScript page components. For information on server-side rendering, see the SSR documentation. Inertia responses. Once the Inertia app has been booted, all subsequent requests to the site are made via XHR with X Inertia header set to true. This header indicates that the request is being made by Inertia and isn't a standard full page visit. When the server detects the X Inertia header, instead of responding with a full HTML document, it returns a JSON response with an encoded page object.
Nice.
Request lifecycle
Yeah.
diagram. Oh, sorry, go
Try
ahead.
try yeah, try to take a bit pause when you scroll. Right after scrolling, take a 0.1 second or 2 second pause so it can uh,
Kind
render
of catch up.
properly. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Request lifecycle diagram. The diagram below illustrates the request lifecycle within an Inertia application. The initial visit generates a standard request to the server, which returns an HTML application skeleton containing a root element with hydrated data. For subsequent user interactions and navigation, Inertia sends XHR requests that return JSON data. Inertia uses this response to dynamically hydrate and swap the page component without a full page reload. Request headers. The following headers are automatically sent by Inertia when making requests. You don't need to set these manually. They're handled by the Inertia client-side adapter. X Inertia set to true to indicate this is Inertia request. X requested with set to XML HTTP requests on all Inertia requests. Accept set to text/HTML application/X HTML plus XML to indicate acceptable response types. X Inertia version, the current asset version to check for asset mismatches. Purpose set to prefetch when making prefetch requests. X inertia partial component, the component name for partial reloads. X inertia partial data, comma separated list of props to include in partial reloads. X inertia partial accept, comma separated list of props to exclude from partial reloads. X inertia reset, comma separated list of props to reset on navigation. Let's see where we're at. Cache control, set to no cache for reload requests to prevent serving stale content. X inertia error bag specifies which error bag to use for validation errors. X inertia infinite scroll merge intent indicates whether the requested data should be appended or prepended when using infinite scroll. X inertia accept once props, comma separated list of non-expired once prop keys already loaded onto the client. The server will skip resolving these props unless explicitly requested via a partial reload or force refresh server side. I think this is like their brand new one, the once stuff that they just added like a week ago. So I haven't had a chance to dive into that yet, but very excited to. The following headers are used for precognition validation requests. Precognition set to true to indicate this is a precognition validation request. Precognition validate only, comma separated list of field names to validate. I think this is also new to Inertia, at least like native Inertia. It used to be like another package that you had to pull in, and then, yeah. So another thing, very excited to get started with that. All right, response headers. The following headers should be sent to your server-side adapter and Inertia responses. If you're using an official server-side adapter, these are handled automatically. X inertia set to true to indicate this is an Inertia response. X inertia location used for external redirects when a 409 conflict response is returned due to asset version mismatches. Vary set to X inertia to help browsers correctly differentiate between HTML and JSON responses. The following headers are used for precognition validation responses. Let me zoom or scroll to that point. Precognition set to true to indicate this is a precognition validation response. Precognition success set to true when validation passes with no errors, combined with a 204 no content status code. Vary set to precognition on all responses when the precognition middleware is applied. The page object. Inertia shares data between the server and client via a page object. This object includes the necessary information required to render the page component, update the browser's history state, and track the site's asset version. The page object can include the following properties. Component, the name of the JavaScript page component. Props, the page props, contains all of the page data along with an errors object, defaults to an empty object if there are no errors. URL, the page URL. Version, the current asset version. Encrypt history, whether or not to encrypt the current page's history state. Clear history, whether or not to clear any encrypted state. Merge props, array of prop keys that should be merged, appended during navigation. Prepend props, array of prop keys that should be prepended during navigation. Deep merge props, array of prop keys that should be deep merged during navigation. Match props on, array of prop keys used for matching when merging props. Scroll props, configuration for infinite scroll prop merging behavior. Deferred props, configuration for client-side lazy loading of props. Once props, configuration for once props that should only be resolved once and reused on subsequent pages. Each entry maps a key to an object containing the prop name. Optional expires at timestamp in milliseconds. On standard full page revisits, the page object is JSON encoded into the data page attribute in the root div. On inertia visits, as indicated by the presence of the X inertia header, the page object is returned as the JSON payload. Basic page object. A minimal page object contains the core properties. Page object with deferred props. When using deferred props, the page object indicates a deferred props configuration. Note that deferred props are not included in the initial props since they are loaded in subsequent requests. I think deferred props is probably my favorite inertia feature. I'll say that. I remember, so like in the applications that we build, we deal with a lot of like external APIs and third-party data. And so waiting for those can sometimes take a long time, especially Bing, not to put them on the spot, but their API is typically very slow to return a response. And so having the deferred props there to where you can just load in your view component and then fire off your third-party API request to have that come back, whenever, been a game changer for sure. So
Yeah.
page object with, page object with deferred props. When using deferred props, the page object includes a deferred props configuration. Note that deferred props are not included in the initial props since they are loaded in a subsequent request. I think I just read that right.
Yeah. So it's
Doubled
kind
up
of
there.
lazy loading.
Yeah, exactly. So you can load in your initial like view component, and then in the background, it'll make requests after the component has loaded and kind of do it in the background. So yeah, lazy loading. Page object with merge props. When using merge props, additional configuration is included. Yeah, so merge props are for
Yeah.
like if you're doing like infinite scrolling or like load more type stuff. You just merge your additional data into the existing data. Works really well.
Nice.
Page object with scroll props. When using infinite scroll, the page object includes scroll props configuration. Page object with once props. When using once props, the page object includes a once props configuration. Each entry maps a key to the prop name and an optional expiration timestamp. See, this one I want to look into because this is new stuff. So you have your once props here. This is your prop name, and then when it expires. Very cool. When navigating to a subsequent page that includes the same once prop, the client sends the loaded keys in the X inertia except once props header. The client skips resolving these props and excludes them from the response. The client reuses the previously loaded values. So right here. Note that plans is included in once props, but not in the prop since it was already loaded on the client. The once props key identifies the once prop across pages while prop specifies the actual prop name. These may differ when using custom keys. Asset versioning. One common challenge with single page apps is refreshing site contents when they've been changed. Inertia makes this easy by optionally tracking the current version of the site's assets. In the event that an asset changes, Inertia will automatically make a full page visit instead of an XHR visit. The Inertia page object includes a version identifier. This version identifier is set server-side and can be a number, string, file hash, or any other value that represents the current version of your site's assets, as long as the value changes when the site assets have been updated. Whenever an Inertia request is made, Inertia will include the current asset version in the X Inertia version header. When the server receives the request, it compares the asset version provided in the X Inertia version header with the current asset version. This is typically handled in the middleware layer of your server-side framework. If the asset versions are the same, the request simply continues as expected. However, if the asset versions are different, the server immediately returns a 409 conflict response and includes the URL in an X Inertia location header. This header is necessary since server-side redirects may have occurred. This tells Inertia what the final intended destination URL is. Note, 409 conflict responses are only set for GET requests and not for post, put, patch, or delete requests. That said, they will be sent in the event a GET redirect occurs after one of these requests. When the Inertia client receives a 409 conflict response, it checks for the presence of the X Inertia location header. If this header exists, Inertia performs a full page visit to the URL specified in the header. This ensures that the user always has the latest assets loaded. If flash session data exists when a 409 conflict response occurs, Inertia's server-side framework adapters will automatically reflash this data. You can read more about this on the asset versioning page. Partial reloads. When making Inertia requests, the partial reload option allows you to request a subset of the props data from the server on subsequent visits to the same page component. This can be helpful performance optimization if it's acceptable that some page data is becomes stale. See the partial reloads documentation for details. When a partial reload request is made, Inertia includes the X Inertia partial component header and may include X inertial partial data and or X inertial partial accept headers with the request. The X inertial partial data header is a comma-separated list of the desired props or data keys that should be returned. The X inertia partial accept header is a comma-separated list of the props, data, keys that should not be returned. When only the X inertia partial accept header is included, all props or data except those listed will be sent. If both X inertia partial data and X inertia partial accept headers are included, the X inertia partial accept header will take precedence. Dude, that is a hard thing to say. I'm not going to lie. That's a tough one. The X inertia partial component header includes the name of the component that is being partially reloaded. This is necessary since partial reloads only work for the requests made on the same page component. If the final destination is different for some reason, e.g. the user was logged out and is now on the login page, then no partial reloading will occur.
Got it.
HTTP status codes. Inertia uses HTTP status codes to handle different scenarios. 200 OK, standard successful response for both HTML and Inertia JSON responses. 302 found, standard redirect response. Inertia server-side adapters automatically convert this to 303 see other when returned after put patch or delete requests. 303 see other, used for redirects after non-get requests. This status code tells the browser to make a get request to the redirect URL, preventing duplicate form submissions that could occur if the browser repeated the original request method. 409 conflict, return when there's an asset version mismatch, or for external redirects. For asset mismatches, this prompts a full page reload. For external redirects, the response includes an X inertia location header and triggers a window.location redirect client side. The following status codes are used for precognition validation requests. 204 no content, successful precognition validation request with no validation errors. 422 unprocessable entity, precognition validation request with validation errors. The response body contains the errors. I think that's the longest page of this entire documentation. That's got to be. All the other
Yeah.
pages are pretty
So
small.
yeah, we uh, almost on half hour, right? And now I understand one thing, that if if I will do something like this in future, I will not start with the core concepts. I will start with the basic, then deep go into the core concept. What do you think? I mean,
That's probably a good idea. Yeah, because it's very high
yeah.
level, and then you dig into the code and you're like, oh, it'd make more sense to read through this and then go back over it. So,
Yeah. Okay, let's go
uh,
ahead.
okay.
What do you think? How much we have? How much we left have left?
I think the basics are pretty, like the pages are relatively small. So, and it's a lot of like code examples, which I'm not going to read over the code examples. So I think we're getting there. We can get
Let's
through
see.
it pretty quick.
Let's see.
Um, so you said that you use the tall stack for most everything, right?
Yeah.
You're there. Yeah. I haven't gotten into, Livewire too much. Aside from I messed around with like native PHP, and I was like,
Oh,
oh, this
nice.
makes 100% sense with native PHP. Like this is the way to go for sure. But I think they've since made a lot of updates on their like JavaScript side or JavaScript framework side. So maybe I'll be able to stick with Inertia, building native PHP apps.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. Now they have added some hooks into. View. I guess
Mhm.
I haven't seen the React part, but I have seen the View inertia part.
Yeah. Very excited for that stuff. Shout out to those guys. That stuff's awesome. All right, pages. When building applications using Inertia, each page in your application typically has its own controller or route and a corresponding JavaScript component. This allows you to retrieve just the data necessary for that page, no API required. In addition, all of the data needed for the page can be retrieved before the page is ever rendered by the browser, eliminating the need for displaying loading states when users visit your application. Creating pages. Inertia pages are simply JavaScript components. If you have ever written a Vue, React, or Svelte component, you will feel right at home. As you can see in the example below, pages receive data from your application's controllers as props. Given the page above, you can render the page by returning an inertia response from a controller or route. In this example, let's assume this page here is stored within a Laravel application. If you attempt to render a page that does not exist, the response will typically be a blank screen. To prevent this, you may set the inertia.ensure pages exist configuration option to true. The Laravel adapter will then throw an inertia component not found exception when a page cannot be found. Creating layouts, while not required for most projects, it makes sense to create a layout component that all of your pages can use. You may have noticed in our page example above that we're wrapping the page content within a layout component. Here's an example of such component. The Laravel
Okay,
dev
so
should
you can
be,
use like slot and yeah,
yep, exactly. Yeah, I think most Laravel devs should be familiar with the concept of a layout or layout file. But yeah,
yeah.
same thing in Vue. You use the slot component to put your stuff right in the middle there. And as you can see, there's nothing inertia specific within this template. This is just a typical component. I think that's probably
Yeah,
another favorite part of inertia is that like you rarely interact with inertia. It's just kind of there and like it's there when you need it and it's not when you don't. So it's nice. Very, very appreciated there.
persistent.
Persistent layouts. While it's simple to implement layouts as children of page components, it forces the layout instance to be destroyed and recreated between visits. This means you cannot have persistent layout state when navigating between pages. For example, maybe you have an audio player on a podcast website that you want to continue playing as users navigate the site, or maybe you simply want to maintain the scroll position in your sidebar navigation between page visits. In these situations, the solution is to leverage Inertia's persistent layouts. You can also create more complex layout arrangements using nested layouts. This is something I don't think I've ever done in Inertia is create a nested layout.
Yeah, I
Don't
mean,
know.
there should be a, I mean, very uh, quite complex use case to use
Mm-hmm.
this.
Yeah. Default layouts.
So
If you're using persistent layouts, you may find it convenient to define the default page layout in the resolve callback of your application's main JavaScript file. This will automatically set the page layout to the layout if a layout has not already been set for that page. You can even go a step further and conditionally set the default page layout based on the page name, which is available to the resolve callback. For example, maybe you don't want the default layout to be applied to your public pages. All right, responses. Creating responses. Creating an inertia response is simple. To get started, invoke the inertia render method within your controller or route, providing both the name of the JavaScript page component that you wish to render, as well as any properties data for the page. In the example below, we'll pass a single property event, which contains 4 attributes: ID, title, start date, and description to the event show page component. To ensure that pages load quickly, only return the minimum data required for the page. Be aware that all data returned from the controllers will be visible client-side, so be sure to omit sensitive information. That's definitely a big one to be aware of as you send data back to your inertia or your Vue components through inertia. Properties. To pass data from the server to your page components, you can use properties. You can pass various types of values as props, including primitive types, arrays, objects, and several Laravel specific types that are automatically resolved.
I like
I
this
think,
user resource thing because you are able
mm-hmm,
to use resources while returning the data, right? So it will
yeah.
automatically remove which is not needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe like also uh, you can like define like how data structure will be after all, right? But in liveware there is no way, no such way, I guess, right now.
Oh, really?
I guess so.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it does feel very like you don't have to change your mindset a whole lot on the Laravel side because yeah, you can just do like user all or all the helper methods that you're used to or facades or anything like that. And then yeah, resources comes in clutch. All right. Arrayable objects like eloquent models and collections are automatically converted using their toArray method. Responsible objects like API resource and JSON responses are resolved through their toResponse method. Provides inertia property interface. When passing props to your components, you may want to create custom classes that can transform themselves into the appropriate data format. While Laravel's arrayable interface simply converts objects to arrays, Inertia offers the more powerful provides inertia property interface for context-aware transformations. This interface requires a toInertia property method that receives a property context object containing the property key, context key, all props for the page, context props, and the request instance, context request.
By the way,
Once
there is a
defined,
concept called, sorry, there is
no,
a
you're good.
concept called, yeah, there is a concept called wireable objects, right? So in basically in livewire, you define everything as a public property, right?
Mm-hmm.
And other thing you directly pass into the view, right? So basically what we, the resource is need for the public properties because like it will be visible to the inner client side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there is a concept called wireable, right? So if you implement the wireable interface and you provide to livewire and from livewire methods, right?
Mm.
It may allow you to use resources for your properties, I guess.
Got it. All right, where were we? Right here. Once defined, you can use this class directly as a prop value. The property context gives you access to the property key, which enables powerful patterns like merging with shared data. Provides inertia properties interface. In some situations, you may want to group related props together for reusability across different pages. You can accomplish this by implementing the provides inertia properties interface. This interface requires a toInertia properties method that returns an array of key value pairs. The method receives a render context object containing the component name and request instance. You can use these prop classes directly in the render and with methods. You can also combine multiple prop classes with other props in an array. Root template data. There are situations where you may want to access your prop data in your application's root blade template. For example, you may want to add a meta description tag, Twitter card meta tags, or Facebook Open Graph meta tags. You can access this data via the page variable. Sometimes you may even want to provide data to the root template that will not be sent to your JavaScript page component. This can be accomplished by invoking the withViewData method. After invoking the withViewData method, you can access the defined data as you would typically access a blade template variable. Interesting. I don't know how I've ever skipped over this part.
It's maybe added uh, after you read this page.
Could be. That's cool though.
Yeah.
So essentially, I guess if I'm reading this right, this withViewData will get pushed into your root Laravel
Yeah.
blade template. Yeah. Very
It's nice
cool.
actually. Blade
Maximum
template
response
or
size.
blade template or the view file?
I think it's saying into the blade template because you have your app.blade.php that has your root,
Oh,
view div. And so you can pass data into your main app layout before it even gets to the view component or
got
the
it.
React component.
Oh, okay. It's good for the ACO.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. It's saying, yeah, you can create your Twitter title. Oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Very cool. Because each page will have specific meta information. And so you can update your overall layout with this view data.
Yeah, but you need to make sure that you are not using persistent layout or something like that.
Sure. Yeah, definitely want to be aware of that. Maximum response size. To enable client-side history navigation, all Inertia server responses are stored in the browser's history state. However, keep in mind that some browsers impose a size limit on how much data can be saved within the history state. For example, Firefox has a size limit of 16 megabytes and throws a NS error illegal value error if you exceed this limit. Typically, this is much more data than you'll ever practically need when building applications.
So this is the some warning which even the front end developer which is not using inertia also like will have to know about, right? Because
Yeah, I think if you're using like the browser, what did it say? Yeah, the browser's history state. So if you're just checking a bunch of data in the browser's history state, there is a limit. So
yeah.
yeah, I think you could run into that. Yeah, just outside of inertia for sure. Okay, redirects. When making a non-get inertia request manually or via link element, you should ensure that you always respond with a proper inertia redirect response. For example, if your controller is creating a new user, your store endpoint should return a redirect back to a standard get endpoint, such as your user index page. Inertia will automatically follow this redirect and update the page accordingly. 303 response code. When redirecting after a put, patch, or delete request, you must use a 303 response code. Otherwise, the subsequent request will not be treated as a GET request. A 303 redirect is very similar to a 302 redirect. However, the follow-up request is explicitly changed to a GET request. If you're using one of our official server-side adapters, all redirects will automatically be converted to 303 redirects.
Nice.
External redirects. Sometimes it's necessary to redirect to an external website or even another non-inertia endpoint in your app while handling an inertia request. This can be accomplished using a server-side initiated window.location visit via the inertia location method.
Yeah.
The inertia location method will generate a 409 conflict response and include the destination URL in the X inertia location header. When this response is received client-side, inertia will automatically perform a window.location equal to URL visit.
So
Okay.
it is something like redirection, but via JS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you're like redirecting to an external page or even an internal page that doesn't use inertia, like I could see it being like privacy policy and like legal pages that aren't necessarily required to be SPAs. You can redirect to those. So.
Yeah.
Okay, routing. Defining routes. When using Inertia, all of your application's routes are defined server-side. This means that you don't need Vue Router or React Router. Instead, you can simply define Laravel routes and return Inertia responses from those routes. Shorthand routes. If you have a page that doesn't need a corresponding controller method like an FAQ or about page, you can route directly to a component via the route inertia method. Generating URLs. Some server-side frameworks allow you to generate URLs from named routes. However, you will not have access to those helpers client-side. Here are a couple ways to still use named routes with Inertia. The first option is to generate URLs server-side and include them as props. Notice in this example how we're passing the edit URL and create URL to the user's index component.
Gotcha. Wayfinder. Oh, nice. And
Yeah,
JSON.
I'm very excited about Wayfinder. When using Laravel, you have several options to make your server-side routes available to your client-side code. Wayfinder. When using Wayfinder, you can pass the generated TypeScript method directly to the link component, form helpers, or router methods, and Inertia understands how to handle it. That might be a PR. That should probably be understands, right? And Inertia
Yeah,
understands how to handle
understands.
it.
Yeah.
In fact, if you're developing an application using one of Laravel's starter kits, Wayfinder is already configured for you. Ziggy. The Ziggy library can make your named server-side routes available to you via global route function. If you're using the Vue plugin included with Ziggy, you may use the route function directly in your templates.
But it also expose some URLs which you don't want to do, I guess. So you need to
With
do configure
Ziggy,
or something like. Yeah.
yeah, I think Ziggy, there are ways that you can do it so that it like, because I think the traditional way is to, it essentially outputs a script tag with like a JSON object of all of your routes, or just an object. And there are ways that you can do it to where I think Ziggy will just generate a file or something that you can import and get your routes that way. So they're not just sitting in your markup. But
Yeah. So there is a configuration, I guess, right? To ignore some particular rules,
yeah,
routes. Yeah.
when server-side rendering is enabled, you may pass an options object to the Ziggy plugin in your ssr.js file. This should include the route definitions and current location. Customizing the page URL. The page object includes a URL that represents the current page's URL. By default, the Laravel adapter resolves this by using the full URL method on the request instance, but strips out the scheme and host, so the result is a relative URL. If you need to customize how the URL is resolved, you may provide a resolver within the URL resolver method of the Inertia handle inertia request middleware. Alternatively, you may define the resolver using the Inertia resolve URL using method. Title and meta.
Okay.
What's that?
No, continue.
Since inertia-powered JavaScript apps are rendered within the document body, they are unable to render markup to the document head as it's outside of their scope. To help with this, Inertia ships with a head component which can be used to set the page title, meta tags, and other head elements. The head component will only replace head elements that are not in your server-side root template. The head component is not available in the Svelte adapter, as Svelte already ships with its own Svelte head component. Head component. To add head elements to your page, use the head component. Within this component, you can include the elements that you wish to add to the document head. Title shorthand. If you only need to add a title to the document head, you may simply pass the title as the prop to the head component. Title callback. You can globally modify the page title using the title callback in the create inertia app setup method. Typically, this method is invoked in your application's main JavaScript file. A common use case for the title callback is automatically adding an app name before or after each page title. After defining the title callback, the callback will automatically be invoked when you set a title using the head component, which in this example will result in the following title tag. The title callback will also be invoked when you set the title tag using a title tag within your head component. Multiple head instances. It's possible to have multiple instances of the head component throughout your application. For example, your layout can set some of the default head elements, and then your individual pages can override those defaults.
Got it. Nice.
So this is so I'm going back to that with page meta or whatever that method was that you could return from your controller. This is what I typically do to set like meta information on the page. So I may have to look into that other way so that it comes like from the server rather than having to wait for the JavaScript app to boot up and then you set that type of stuff.
Yes.
Okay, Inertia will only ever render one title tag. However, all other title tags will be stacked since it's valid to have multiple instances of them. To avoid duplicate tags in your head, you can use the head key property, which will make sure that the tag is only rendered once. This is illustrated in the example above for the meta name description tag. The code example above will render the following HTML. Head extension. When building a real application, it can sometimes be helpful to create a custom head component that extends Inertia's head component. This gives you a place to set app-wide defaults, such as appending the name to the page title. Once you have created the custom component, you can just start using it in your pages. Inertia attribute on elements. Inertia has historically used the inertia attribute to track and manage elements in the document head. However, you can now opt into using the more standards compliant data inertia attribute instead. According to the HTML specification, custom attributes should be prefixed with data dash to avoid conflicts with future HTML standards. To enable this, configure the future.useData inertia head attribute option in your application defaults. Links. To create links to other pages within an Inertia app, you will typically use Inertia's link component. This component is a light wrapper around the standard anchor tag or anchor link that intercepts clicks, events, and prevents full page reloads. This is how Inertia provides a single page app experience once your application has been loaded. Creating links. To create an Inertia link, use the Inertia link component. Any attributes you provide to this component will be proxied to the underlying HTML tag. By default, Inertia renders links as anchor elements. However, you can change the tag using the as prop. Creating post, put, patch, delete, anchor links is discouraged as it causes open link in new tab window accessibility issues. The component automatically renders a button element when using these methods. Method, you can specify the HTTP request method for an inertia link request using the method prop. The default method used by links is get, but you can use the method prop to make it post, put, patch, and delete requests via links.
So link is using like Axios or something like that in the background, or it's a form.
Yeah, I think it's using Axios in the background. You can submit stuff like this where you can change the method to post, and it'll essentially submit as a form. I think that's typically how they want you to do like log in or log out, so that you can't send a log out via get. So you can just do it just like that, and you don't have to set up a whole form tag and do all that stuff. It's just simple link
Super
tag.
easy. Yeah, even you can say like as button. That's nice.
Mm-hmm.
You will be able to pass the classes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good.
Wayfinder. When using Wayfinder in conjunction with the link component, you can simply pass the resulting object directly to the href prop. The link will infer the HTTP method and URL directly from the Wayfinder object. Data. When making post or put requests, you may wish to add additional data to the request. You can accomplish this using the data prop. The provided data can be an object or a form data instance. Custom headers. The headers prop will allow you to add custom headers to an inertia link. However, the headers inertia uses internally to communicate its state to the server take priority and therefore cannot be overwritten.
Also,
Browser history. What's that?
I just read browser history.
The replace prop allows you to specify the browser's history behavior. By default, page visits push new state, window.history push state into the history. However, it's also possible to replace state, window.history.replace state, by setting the replace prop to true. This will cause the visit to replace the current history state instead of adding new history state to the stack. State preservation. You can preserve a page component's local state using the preserve state prop. This will prevent a page component from fully re-rendering. The preserve state prop is especially helpful on pages that contain forms, since you can avoid manually repopulating input fields and can also maintain a focused input. Scroll preservation. You can use the preserve scroll prop to prevent inertia from automatically resetting the scroll position when making a page visit. For more information on managing scroll position, check out the documentation on scroll management. Partial reloads. The only prop allows you to specify that only a subset of a page's props data should be retrieved from the server on subsequent visits to that page. For more information on this topic, check out the complete documentation on partial reloads. View transitions. You may enable view transitions for a link by setting the view transition prop to true. This will use the browser's view transitions API to animate the page transition. Active states. It's common to set an active state for navigation links based on the current page. This can be accomplished when using inertia by inspecting the page object and doing string comparisons against the page.url and page.component properties.
Nice.
Yeah, this is a good one. I don't think I ever use page.component to check. It's always URL based. Always like, hey, if this is the active URL, then I want the class active. But
It provides start with and those.
mm-hmm.
So it is just a string, right?
Yeah. Yep. You can perform exact match comparisons. Starts with comparisons, useful for matching a subset of pages, or even more complex comparisons using regular expressions. Using this approach, you're not limited to just setting class names. You can use this technique to conditionally render any markup on active state, such as different link text or even an SVG icon that represents that link is active. Data loading attribute.
Like we if we have a drop down or something like that with all users page, so we can just do user/star.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, if you're doing like regex or
Yeah,
something
it
like
is.
that.
Mhm.
Data loading attribute. While a link is making an active request, a data loading attribute is added to the link element. This allows you to style a link while it's in a loading state. The attribute is removed once the request is complete.
Nice. We have a wire loading state in a live wire.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I can just
Yeah, kind of the same thing. And it sits just right on the element as it's making a request, right? Kind of the same concept.
yeah.
Manual visits. In addition to creating links, it's also possible to manually make inertia visits requests programmatically via JavaScript. This is accomplished via the router visit method. So yeah, this is like really the only time that you typically directly interact with inertia. Like you pull in the router and like use it somewhere in a method or something like that. But otherwise, yeah, inertia is like very out of the way.
So what
However,
is the
it's
use
generally
case
more
for
convenient. What's that?
sorry? What is the use case for like manual visits?
So before they had the deferred stuff, I would use manual visits to like your controller would return your view component, but it wouldn't make any like third party data requests. It would just return the view component. And then as soon as that component has been mounted or created or whichever lifecycle hook you want to tap into, then you would do like a router. I think there's a reload.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you would do a router reload. That would make your heavier requests and pull in like all the third party data once the page has already like loaded the component. So
Got it.
that's one example. But again, I don't even use that anymore because deferred came in and saved the day. And yeah. So,
Yeah.
okay. However, it's
It
generally
is
more
the. I
convenient
mean,
to, oh, sorry,
sorry,
go
one
ahead.
more question. It, I mean, does it provide some hooks like so it will load automatically, but it will call if dispatch some event or call some closures for you, kind of
So
a
you
time.
can, yeah, using like the deferred stuff, you can tell it which props to load in afterward.
Oh,
Yeah.
mhm.
I think, is that
Got
your
it.
question?
I it was similar, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. However, it's generally more convenient to use one of Inertia's shortcut request methods. These methods share all the same options as router visit. So yeah, just helpers on top of visit. The reload method is a convenient shorthand method that automatically visits the current page with the preserve state and preserve scroll both set to true, making it the perfect method to invoke when you just want to reload the current page's data. Method. When making manual visits, you may use the method option to set the request's HTTP method to get, post, put, patch, or delete. The default method is get. Uploading files via put or
Oh,
patch is not supported in Laravel. Instead, make the request via post, including a underscore method field to set put or patch. This is called form method spoofing. Wayfinder. When using Wayfinder, you can pass the resulting object directly to any router method. The router will infer the HTTP method and URL from the Wayfinder object. If you provide both a Wayfinder object and specify the method option will take precedence. Oh, that's good to know. Data. You may use the data option to add data to the request. For convenience, the get, post, put, and patch methods all accept data as their second argument. Custom headers. The headers option allows you to add custom headers to a request. The headers Inertia uses internally to communicate its state to the server take priority and therefore cannot be overwritten. Global visit options. You may configure a visit options callback when initializing your Inertia app to modify visit options globally for every request. The callback receives the target URL and the current visit options, and you should return an object with any options you want to override. File uploads. When making visits requests that include files, Inertia will automatically convert the request data into a form data object. If you would like the request to always use form data object, you may use the force form data option. For more information on uploading files, check out the dedicated file uploads documentation. Browser history. When making visits, Inertia automatically adds a new entry into the browser history. However, it's also possible to replace the current history entry by setting the replace option to true. Visits made to the same URL automatically set replace to true.
I seen this replace also at links part, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
So
links are the exact same as like using the router. They're just using the router.get or something like that. Or if you override the post. So that's essentially what these are, is just a programmatic way to use the links functionality. So they should share pretty much all the same props and like events like this. So client-side visits. You can use the router.push and router.replace method to make client-side visits. This method is useful when you want to update the browser's history without making a server request. All of the parameters are optional by default. All past parameters except airbag will be merged with the current page. This means you are responsible for overriding the current page's URL, component, and props. If you need access to the current page's props, you can pass a function to the props option. This function will receive the current page's props as an argument and should return the new props. The airbag option allows you to specify which airbag to use when handling validation errors in the on-error callback. Make sure that any route you push on the client side is also defined on the server side. If the user refreshes the page, the server will need to know how to render the page. Prop helpers. Inertia provides 3 helper methods for updating page props without making server requests. These methods are shortcuts to router.replace and automatically set preserve scroll and preserve state to true. All 3 methods support dot notation for nested props and can accept a callback function that receives the current value as the first argument and the current page props as the second argument. State preservation. By default, page visits to the same page create a fresh page component instance. This causes any local states such as form inputs, scroll positions, and focus states to be lost. However, in some situations, it's necessary to preserve the page component state. For example, when submitting a form, you need to preserve your form data in the event that form validation fails on the server. For this reason, the post, put, patch, delete, and reload methods all set preserve state option to true by default. You can instruct Inertia to preserve the component state when using the get method by setting the preserve state option to true. If you'd like to only preserve state if the response includes validation errors, set the preserve state option to errors. Okay, didn't know that. That's awesome. You can also lazily evaluate the preserve state option based on the response by providing a callback. Scroll preservation. When navigating between pages, Inertia mimics default browser behavior by automatically resetting the scroll position of the document body as well as any scroll regions you've defined. Back to the top of the page. You can disable this behavior by setting the preserve scroll option to true. If you'd like to only preserve the scroll position if the response includes validation errors, set the preserve scroll option to errors. You can also lazily evaluate the preserve scroll option based on the response by providing a callback. For more information regarding this feature, please consult the scroll management documentation. Partial reloads. The only option allows you to request a subset of the props data from the server on subsequent visits to the same page, thus making your application more efficient since it does not need to retrieve data that the page is not interested in refreshing. For more information on this feature, please consult the partial reloads documentation. View transitions. You may enable view transitions for a visit by setting the view transition option to true. This will use the browser's view transitions API to animate the page transition. Visit cancellation. You can cancel a visit using a cancel token, which Inertia automatically generates and provides via the onCancel token callback prior to making the visit. The onCancel and onFinish event callbacks will be executed when a visit is canceled. Event callbacks. In addition to Inertia's global events, Inertia also provides a number of per visit event callbacks. Returning false from the on before callback will cause the visit to be canceled. It's also possible to return a promise from the on success and on error callbacks. When doing so, the finish event will be delayed until the promise has resolved. All right, going into forms.
This is V2 things, right?
Sorry, what's that?
This is V2 thing, right? It wasn't there in V1. I mean,
Yeah, yep. You mean forms?
yeah.
Yeah. Yep, forms. Actually, I think they were like midway through V2. Because like typically what you would do, and I'm sure we'll get to it, is you would define a form, you would import use form from Inertia, and then you would define your form there. But the actual form component is pretty recent.
Yeah.
All right, forms. Inertia provides two primary ways to build forms via the form component and the use form helper. There we go. Both integrate with your server-side framework's validation and handle form submissions without full page reloads. The form component. Inertia provides a form component that behaves much like a classic HTML form, but uses inertia under the hood to avoid full page reloads. This is the simplest way to get started with forms and inertia. Just like a traditional HTML form, there's no need to attach to your input fields. Just give each input a name attribute, and the form component will handle the data submission for you. The component also supports nested data structures, file uploads, and dotted key notation. You can pass a transform prop to modify the form data before submission. This is useful for injecting additional fields or transforming existing data, although hidden inputs work too. Wayfinder. When using Wayfinder, you can pass the resulting object directly to the action prop. The form component will infer the HTTP method and URL from the Wayfinder object. Man, I'm so excited about Wayfinder, especially when it comes to, like, obviously you can do this type of stuff right now where it'll infer the method and URL just by pulling it in.
Yeah.
But when it's like you get like validation errors or anything like that, like eventually Wayfinder will support TypeScript types for all of that type of stuff. So yeah, very excited about the future of Wayfinder. Default values.
So now you are using a form component from the Laravel itself, right? Or Inertia itself.
Yeah.
It will now also take care of the form errors from Wayfinder too, right? I mean,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think you'll still output the markup for it, but it should have like all that stuff ready to go for you, already typed and everything. So yeah. Default values. You can set default values for form inputs using standard HTML attributes used for text inputs and text areas and for checkboxes and radios. Checkbox inputs. When working with checkboxes, you may want to add an explicit value attribute such as value equals 1. Without a value attribute, checkboxes will submit as on, which some server-side validation rules may not recognize as a proper Boolean value. Slot props. The form component exposes reactive state and helper methods through its default slot, giving you access to form processing state, errors, and utility functions. So yeah, lots of cool stuff here. And then yeah, errors come in right there. So you should have access to like all that type of stuff. The defaults method allows you to update the form's default values to match the current field values. When called, subsequent reset calls will store fields to these new defaults, and the isDirty property will track changes from these updated defaults. Unlike useForm, this method accepts no arguments and always uses all current form values. The errors object uses dotted notation for nested fields, allowing you to display validation messages for complex form structures. Props and options. In addition to action and method, the form component accepts several props. Many of them are identical to the options available in Inertia's visit options. Some props are intentionally grouped under options instead of being top level to avoid confusion. For example, only, accept, and reset relate to partial reloads, not partial submissions. The general rule, top level props are for the form submission itself, while options control how Inertia handles the subsequent visit. When setting the prop, the form component will add the inert attribute to the HTML form tag while the form is processing to prevent user interaction. To style the form while it's processing, you can target the inert form in the following ways. So it looks like Tailwind has an inert kind of helper there. Interesting.
I didn't know.
Yeah, me either. That's a new one for sure. That's why we're reading the docs, baby. Let's go. Events. The form component emits all the standard visit events for form submissions. Excuse me. Resetting the form. The form component provides several attributes that allow you to reset the form after a submission. Reset on success may be used to reset the form after a successful submission. Reset on error may be used to reset the form after errors. Setting new default values. The form component provides the set defaults on success attribute to set the current form values as the new defaults after a successful submission. Dotted key notation. The form component supports dotted key notation for creating nested objects from flat input names. This provides a convenient way to structure form data. The example above would generate the following data structure. If you need literal dots in your field names, not as nested object separators, you can escape them using backslashes. The example above would generate the following data structure. Programmatic access. You can access the form's methods programmatically using refs. This provides an alternative to slot props when you need to trigger form actions from outside the form. In React and Vue, refs provide access to all form methods and reactive state. In Svelte, refs expose only methods, so reactive state like isDirty and errors should be accessed via slot props instead. Precognition.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think this is new. This is the new stuff with adding precognition natively to the Inertia form. The form component includes built-in support for Laravel precognition, enabling real-time form validation without duplicating your server-side validation rules on the client. Precognition requires server-side support. Laravel users should see the Laravel precognition documentation for setup instructions. For other frameworks, see the protocol page for implementation details. Once your server is configured, call validate with a field name to trigger validation on that field. The invalid helper checks if a field has validation errors, while validating indicates when a request is in progress. You may also use the valid helper to check if a field has passed validation. Right here. Those are cool. That's way cool. A form input will only appear as valid or invalid once it is changed and validation response has been received. Validating multiple fields. You may validate multiple fields at once using the only option. This is particularly useful when building wizard-style forms where you want to validate all visible fields before proceeding to the next step. Touch and validate. The touch method marks the field as touched without triggering validation. You may then validate all touch fields by calling validate without arguments. The touched helper may also be called without arguments to check if any field has been touched. The reset method clears the touch state for reset fields. Options. The validate method accepts an options object with callbacks and configuration. You may also call validate with only an options object to validate specific fields. Validation requests are automatically debounced. The first request fires immediately, then subsequent changes are debounced 1500 milliseconds by default. You may customize this timeout. Good to know. By default, files are excluded from validation requests to avoid unnecessary uploads. You may enable file validation when you need to validate file inputs like size or MIME type. I wondered about how file validation would work. Because like you would want to know, which I guess you can set that type of stuff on the client, like file type and stuff like that. But by default, validation errors are simplified to strings. The first error message, you may keep errors as arrays to display all error messages for fields with multiple validation rules. Form helper. In addition to the form component, Inertia also provides a use form helper for when you need programmatic control over your form's data and submission behavior.
How cool it is to read the use form helper in Vue.js.
Yeah, I mean, we've used it for, I don't know how long, forever now. So it's like, yeah, it's hard to like ignore it. But yeah, coming back and just being able to use the form component is very nice.
Yeah.
To submit the form, you may use the get, post, put, patch, and delete methods. The submit methods support all of the typical visit options, such as preserve state, preserve scroll, and event callbacks, which can be helpful for performing tasks on successful form submissions. For example, you might use the onSuccess callback to reset inputs to their original state. If you need to modify the form data before it's sent to the server, you can do so via the transform method. You can use the processing property to track if a form is currently being submitted. This can be helpful for preventing double form submissions by disabling the submit button. If your form is uploading files, the current progress event is available via the progress property, allowing you to easily display the upload progress. Form errors. If there are form validation errors, they are available via the errors property. When building Laravel-powered inertia applications, form errors will automatically be populated when your application throws instances of validation exception, such as when using request validate. For a more thorough discussion of form validation and errors, please consult the validation documentation. To determine if a form has any errors, you may use the has errors property to clear form errors. Use the clear errors method. If you're using client-side input validation libraries or do client-side validation manually, you can set your own errors on the form using the set errors method. Unlike an actual form submission, the page's props remain unchanged when manually setting errors on a form instance. When a form has been successfully submitted, the was successful property will be true. In addition to this, forms have a recently successful property, which will be set to true for 2 seconds after a successful form submission. This property can be utilized to show temporary success messages. You may customize the duration of the recently successful state by setting the form.recentlySuccessful duration option in your application defaults. The default is 2000 milliseconds. Resetting the form. To reset the form's values back to their default values, you can use the reset method. Sometimes you may want to restore your form fields to their default values and clear any validation errors at the same time. Instead of calling reset and clear errors separately, you can use the reset and clear errors method, which combines both actions into a single call. Setting new default values. If your form's default values become outdated, you can use the defaults method to update them. Then the form will be reset to correct values the next time the reset method is invoked. Form field change tracking. To determine if a form has any changes, you may use the isDirty property. Canceling form submissions. To cancel a form submission, use the cancel method. Form data in history state. To instruct Inertia to store a form's data and errors in history state, you can provide a unique form key as the first argument when instantiating your form. More Wayfinder stuff. All right. When using Wayfinder in conjunction with the form helper, you can simply pass the resulting object directly to the form submit method. The form helper will infer the HTTP method and URL from the Wayfinder object.
Do you think this Wayfinder documentation should be in Wayfinder instead? Like here.
I think it will be eventually. It's like pretty light right now, but I think it'll get there. Precognition. Just like the form component, the useForm helper supports the precognition for real-time validation. You may enable it by chaining the with precognition method to the HTTP method and endpoint for validation requests. Precognition requires server-side support. Laravel users should see the Laravel precognition documentation for instructions. Talked about that. Yeah, I think you'll probably see something like this on Wayfinder in the future, where it's like, hey, go look at the Wayfinder docs. For backwards compatibility with Laravel precognition packages, you may also pass the method and URL as the first arguments to useForm. Since precognition is now built in, you may remove the Laravel precognition package and import useForm from your Inertia adapter instead. You may also use Wayfinder when enabling precognition. Wait, how does this work? So this is your Wayfinder like type, and you do
Yes,
useForm.
by default Wayfinder use form comes with precognition stuff.
Oh,
So you
got
don't
it.
need a precognition package if you're using Wayfinder already.
Mm-hmm. Cool, very cool. Once precognition is enabled, call validate with a field name to trigger validation for that field. The invalid helper checks if a field has validation errors, while validating indicates when a request is in progress. You may also use the valid helper to check if a field has passed validation. Touch and validate. The touch method marks the field as touched without triggering validation. You may then validate all touched fields by calling validate. Without arguments, the touched helper checks if a field has been touched. The reset method clears the touch state for reset fields. Options. The validation requests are automatically debounced. The first request. Why does it feel like we're reading this again? Is this in a different section? Maybe it's
Yes, it is.
precognition. That's all right. All right. Validation requests are automatically debounced. The first request fires immediately when subsequent changes are debounced, 1500 milliseconds by default. You may customize this timeout using set validation timeout. By default, files are excluded from validation requests to avoid unnecessary file uploads. You may enable file validation using validate files. By default, validation errors are simplified to strings. The first error message, you can indicate you would like all errors as arrays using with all errors. With precognition enabled, you may call submit without arguments to submit the configured endpoint. Server-side responses. When using Inertia, you don't typically inspect form responses client-side like you would with traditional XHR fetch requests. Instead, your server-side route or controller issues a redirect response after processing the form, often redirecting to a success page. The redirect-based approach works with all form submission methods, the form component, use form helper, and manual router submissions. It makes handling inertia forms feel very similar to classic server-side form submissions.
By the way, don't you want to have some water or something like that? Are you reading
Yeah,
from 1.5 hour already?
yes. Great idea. Very good idea. Okay, server-side validation. Both the form component and use form helper automatically handle server-side validation errors. When your server returns validation errors, they're automatically available in the errors object without any additional configuration. Unlike traditional XHR fetch requests where you might check for a 422 status code, Inertia handles validation errors as part of its redirect-based flow, just like classic server-side form submissions, but without the full page reload. For a complete guide on validation error handling, including error bags and advanced scenarios, see the validation documentation. Manual form submissions. It's also possible to submit forms manually using Inertia's router methods directly without using the form component or use form helper. File
It
uploads.
used
When
to be
making,
default, right?
oh, sorry. Yeah.
Maybe it used to be default, right? Before
Mhm.
the form component and all came, maybe.
Well, not the router way. There was like the use form, or if you were using like the view options API, you would just call like this dot dollar inertia, and it had a form method on that. So that's kind of how you would do it before the form component. File uploads. When making requests or form submissions that include files, Inertia will automatically convert the request data into form data object. This works with the form component, use form helper, and manual router submissions. For more information on file uploads, including progress tracking, see the file uploads documentation. XHR fetch submissions. Using Inertia to submit forms works great for the vast majority of situations. However, in the event that you need more control over the form submission, you're free to make plain XHR or fetch requests instead using the library of your choice.
Do you think like the forms component is a bigger page than the protocol one?
Sorry, say that again.
You said like the protocol page was the biggest one, right?
Oh,
The
yeah,
longer one. But now it feels like forms one is longer than the protocol page.
definitely. Yeah. And they
Yeah.
added quite a bit. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, they added quite a bit with the new like forms component. And so, yeah, definitely
The
quite a bit more
Wayfinder
there.
thing.
Wayfinder, precognition, tons of stuff added to the forms page for sure.
We already reread the docs on 1.5 hour almost. Let's
Oh,
see
wow.
how it goes.
Oh, there's still quite a bit more. Okay. Well, you tell me when to stop. Do we need to do a round two? We can definitely do that.
What do you think? I mean, we cannot finish by today, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought we'd like fly through this. I think these pages are much shorter, but yeah, it seems like these
You are
pages
just
that
thinking that. I don't know.
yeah.
This file upload seems shorter.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, let's continue. Let's see.
Okay, perfect. All right, file uploads, form data conversion. When making Inertia requests that include files, even nested files, Inertia will automatically convert the request data into a form data object. This conversion is necessary in order to submit a multi-part form data request via XHR. If you would like the request to always use form data object, regardless of whether a file is present in the data, you may provide the force form data option when making the request.
I
You
have
can
read
learn more
this
about the
already, right? We have already read this, right? Somewhere.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of repetition when it comes to like certain aspects of
Specific.
inertia.
Yeah,
Yeah.
gotcha. Hmm.
File upload example. Let's examine a complete file upload example using inertia. This example includes both name text input and an avatar file input. So here looks like they're using use form to set up their form there. Yeah. Okay. This example uses the Inertia form helper for convenience, since the form helper provides easy access to the current upload progress. However, you are free to submit your forms using the manual Inertia visits as well. Multi-part limitations. Uploading files using multi-part form data requests is not natively supported in some server-side frameworks when using the put, patch, delete, or delete HTTP methods. The simplest workaround for this limitation is to simply upload files using a post request instead. However, some frameworks such as Laravel and Rails support form method spoofing, which allows you to upload the files using post, but have the framework handle the request as a put or patch request. This is done by including an underscore method attribute in the data of your request.
Yeah. By the way, this Ask AI is from Inertia Docs or it's an extension from your browser.
Where at?
The code block, the right upper corner. Yeah,
Like
the
right?
Ask AI thing. Ask AI
Oh,
thing. Yeah, it's from the
yeah. I think,
docs.
yeah, I think that's just part of the docs. I don't have anything like browser extension
Easy, right?
to add that. Yeah. Okay, validation. How it works. Handling server-side validation errors in Inertia works differently than a classic XHR-driven form that requires you to catch the validation errors from 422 responses and manually update the form's error state. Because Inertia never receives 422 responses, instead, Inertia operates much more like a standard full-page form submission. Here's how. First, you submit your form using Inertia. If there are server-side validation errors, you don't return those errors as a 422 JSON response. Instead, you redirect server-side to the user back to the form page they were previously on, flashing the validation errors in the session. Some frameworks, such as Laravel, do this automatically. Next, anytime these validation errors are present in the session, they automatically get shared with Inertia, making them available client-side as page props, which you can display in your own form. Since page props are reactive, they are automatically shown when the form submission completes. Finally, since Inertia apps never generate 422 responses, Inertia needs another way to determine if a response includes validation errors. To do this, Inertia checks the page.props.errors objects for the existence of any errors. In the event that errors are present, the request on error callback will be called instead of the on success callback. Sharing errors. In order for your server-side validation errors to be available client-side, your server-side framework must share them via the errors prop. Inertia's first-party adapters, such as the Laravel adapter, do this automatically. For the other frameworks, you may need to do this manually. Please refer to your specific server-side adapter documentation for more information. Displaying errors. Since validation errors are made available client-side as page component props, you can conditionally display them based on their existence. Remember, when using our first-party server adapters, such as the Laravel adapter, the errors prop will automatically be available to your page. When using the view adapters, you may also access the errors via the page props errors object. Multiple errors per field. By default, Inertia's Laravel adapter returns only the first validation error for each field. You may opt into receiving all errors by setting the with all errors property to true in your middleware. When enabled, each field will contain an array of error strings instead of a single string. You may configure TypeScript to expect arrays instead of strings in a global.t.ts file. Repopulating input. While handling errors in Inertia is similar to a full-page form submissions, Inertia often offers even more benefits. In fact, you don't even need to manually repopulate old form input data. When validation occurs, the user is typically redirected back to the form page they were previously on, and by default, Inertia automatically preserves the component state for post, put, patch, and delete requests. Therefore, the old form input data remains exactly as it was when the user submitted the form. So the only work remaining is to display any validation errors using the errors prop. Error bags. If you're using the form helper, it's not necessary to use error bags since validation errors are automatically scoped to the form object making the request. For pages that have more than one form, it's possible to encounter conflicts when displaying validation errors if two forms share the same field names. For example, imagine a create company form and a create user form that both have a name field. Since both forms will be displaying the page.props.errors.name validation error, generating a validation error for the name field in either form will cause the error to appear in both forms. To solve this, you could use error bags. Error bags scope the validation errors returned from the server within a unique key specific to that form. Continuing with our example above, you might have a create company error bag for the first form and a create user error bag for the second form. Specifying an error bag will cause the validation errors to come back from the server with the page.props.errors.createCompany and create user. View transitions. I think this is a newer one too. Yeah, 2.2.13.
This is
All
good.
right.
They are providing the version on the top. I mean,
Yeah, like when the feature first got introduced to the framework.
yeah. So
Very
it is
cool.
like V 2.2.13, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you go to the Laravel docs, there will be many features, but you cannot know like from which patch version it was
Yeah,
available.
I think it just is like the major. All you do is like
Yeah.
v12.x. That's like the only one you get. So yeah, that would be a nice addition to any documentation. Really, that's good catch there for sure. Okay, view transitions. Inertia supports the view transitions API, allowing you to animate page transitions. The view transitions API is a relatively new browser feature. Inertia gracefully falls back to standard page transitions in browsers that don't support the API. Enabling transitions. You may enable view transitions for a visit by setting the view transition option to true. By default, this will apply a crossfade transition between pages. Transition callbacks. You may also pass a callback to the view transition option, which will receive the standard view transition instance provided by the browser. This allows you to hook into the various promises provided by the API. Links. The view transition option is also available on the link component. You may also pass a callback to access the view transition instance. Global configuration. You may enable the view transitions globally for all visits by configuring the visit options callback when initializing your Inertia app. Customizing transitions. You may customize the transition animation using CSS. The View Transitions API uses several pseudo elements that you can target with CSS to create custom animations. The following examples are taken from the Chrome documentation. You may also animate individual elements between pages by assigning them to a unique view transition name. For example, you may animate an avatar from a large size on a profile page to a small size on a dashboard. You may customize view transitions to your liking using any CSS animations you wish. For more information, please consult the View Transitions API documentation. Also, Laracast just released that new animations series with Simon. It's a very good one to watch to like get all of this information about like the CSS transition transition API and He goes through a lot of like animation libraries as well, so it's a good one.
Yeah. Even we have one new series today launched or maybe yesterday. I don't even know, remember, but from Joe Tanenbaum.
Yeah, he did like a
Is it
TypeScript
related to
one.
inertia? Yeah, it's quite related to inertia as well. Mm-hmm.
I think it's just mostly TypeScript, but I haven't watched it yet, so I'm not sure if it's like inertia based or just
Okay.
TypeScript focused.
Yeah.
Um,
If you
okay.
want to work with Wayfinder and all, you need to learn that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's like kind of what got me into TypeScript is learning about Wayfinder. Obviously, you encounter TypeScript a lot, and so I knew a little bit about it, used it briefly, but using Wayfinder is like, oh, this like clicks. This makes sense. I get why people would use this all the time. So
Yeah.
okay. Shared data. Sometimes you need access to specific pieces of data on numerous pages within your application. For example, you may need to display the current user in the site header. Passing this data manually in each response across your entire application is cumbersome. Thankfully, there's a better option, shared data. Sharing data. Inertia's server-side adapters all provide a method of making shared data available for every request. This is typically done outside of your controllers. Shared data will be automatically merged with the page props provided in your controller. In Laravel applications, this is typically handled by the handle inertia request middleware that is automatically installed when installing the server-side adapter. Alternatively, you can manually share data using the inertia share method. Shared data should be used sparingly as all shared data is included with every response. Page props and shared data are merged together, so be sure to namespace your shared data appropriately to avoid collisions. Sharing once props. You may share data that is resolved only once and remembered by the client across subsequent navigations using once props. Alternatively, you may define a dedicated share once method in the middleware. The middleware will evaluate both share and share once, merging the results. You may also share once props manually using the inertia share once method. Accessing shared data. Once you have shared the data server side, you'll be able to access it within any of your pages or components. Here's an example of how to access shared data in a layout component. Flash messages. Another great use case for shared data is flash messages. These are messages stored in the session only for the next request. For example, it's common to set a flash message after completing a task and before redirecting to a different page. Here's a simple way to implement flash messages in your Inertia applications. First, share the flash message on each request. Next, display the flash message in a front-end component such as the site layout. Yeah, I think all the rest of these are going to be pretty close to this size, but I do want to check, how are you on time?
I don't mind, but like, do you want to continue?
Totally up to you. I know we're like you're at like super late at night, right? So you're
Yeah, it's 10:45 around.
yeah. So your call. If you want to pick up and do another one, we can totally do that, but totally up to you. Keep going. Good.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Even if you want to take 15 minutes break or something like that, I don't know. 5 minutes
Um,
break or something like that. I don't know.
yeah, we could do that. That'll work. You want to do that?
Or what do you think? Like, how much time we will take if you want to complete full?
5 minutes.
No, no, not break.
Oh,
The
sorry.
docs.
What do you mean?
So
Like,
how much? Yeah, how much time we will need more to complete all the docs?
ooh, that's a great question. I'm not sure. Should we kind of
Yeah,
like
that
click through them and see how long they are?
yeah can do quickly, I guess.
So this one seems pretty short.
As well.
Pretty short. A little bit longer. Oh, yeah,
Nothing
super short.
fetching. This one. Yeah,
It's got a
go
little
ahead.
bit there.
This is a bit bigger. This is also short.
And security,
Security
very short, very short.
again short. Yeah, this is okay. This is also short. Short. Short again.
Ooh,
Bit
that's a big
longer.
one. Mostly code snippets, though.
Yeah.
Let's see, progress indicators.
Same. Okay.
It's another good one.
Listing. Okay.
So where are we at? We're
So we
on
will, yeah, we will need one more hour, right? I guess.
probably something like that.
And maybe if we skip advanced stuff, we'll still need a half hour.
Skip this advanced stuff here.
What do you think, I mean?
Yeah, I think, going from, so we're at partial reloads, going down here. Yeah, probably an hour. Could be slightly more than an hour, but probably something like that. What do you
Two, I
think?
guess. I don't know.
What's that?
I'm thinking. Security stuff is easy. Maybe for advanced stuff, we can probably do a separate stream.
Mm-hmm. So just get through these three or these two right here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
Let's go.
that will gonna make sense. Like if we do separate stream for just advanced talks,
Yeah.
right? Even what I understand is now, if we started with the basics and completed with the security, we could
Mm-hmm.
do core concept and the advanced stuff later on. You know what
Oh,
I
for
mean?
sure. Yeah.
So what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, we're at just about 2 hours now. We could go another hour today or just reschedule and do the rest of it on another one. That might be okay.
Okay. Hmm.
Should we do that?
I don't know. Let do lottery or something like that.
Yeah. Or I can keep going. Like I said, totally up to you. I know it's just later for you there. I'm pretty early in the day, so I got plenty of time.
I'm just thinking like, I mean, I don't think so. Like part two will make sense. But if we do just part two for the advanced docs, right? It
Mm-hmm.
will gonna make sense. So what I think is we can complete till security today,
Okay.
and we will do advance and core concept again in the second stream. So we will read core concepts again.
Got it. That
What do you
works.
think?
Yeah. Let's keep going. All right. Partial reloads. When making visits to the same page you are already on, it's not always necessary to refetch all of the page's data from the server. In fact, selecting only a subset of the data can be a helpful performance optimization if it's acceptable that some page data becomes stale. Inertia makes this possible via its partial reload feature. As an example, consider a user index page that includes a list of users as well as an option to filter the users by their company. On the first request to the page, both the users and company's props are passed to the page component. However, on subsequent visits to the same page, maybe to filter the users, you can request only the user's data from the server without requesting the company's data. Inertia will then automatically merge the partial data returned from the server with the data it already has in memory client side. Partial reloads only work for visits made to the same page component. Only certain props. To perform a partial reload, use the only visit option to specify which data the server should return. This option should be an array of keys which correspond to the keys of the props. accept certain props. In addition to the only visit option, you can also use the accept visit option to specify which data the server should exclude. This option should also be an array of keys which correspond to the keys of the props. Router shorthand. Since partial reloads can only be made to the same page component the user is already on, it almost always makes sense to just use the router reload method, which automatically uses the current URL. Using links. It's also possible to perform partial reloads with inertia links using the only property. Lazy data evaluation. For partial reloads to be most effective, be sure to also use lazy data evaluation when returning props from your server-side routes or controllers. This can be accomplished by wrapping all optional page data in a closure. When Inertia performs a request, it will determine which data is required, and only then will it evaluate the closure. This can significantly increase the performance of pages that contain a lot of optional data. Additionally, Inertia provides an Inertia optional method to specify that props should never be included unless explicitly requested using the only option. On the inverse, you can use the Inertia always method to specify that a prop should always be included, even if it has not been explicitly required in a partial reload. Here's a summary of each approach. Combining with once prop, you may chain the once modifier onto an optional prop to ensure the data is resolved only once and remembered by the client across subsequent navigations. For more information on once props, see the once prop documentation. All right. Deferred props. Using deferred props feature allows you to defer the loading of certain page data until after the initial page render. This can be useful for improving the perceived performance of your app by allowing the initial page render to happen as quickly as possible. Server side. To defer a prop, you can use the inertia defer method when returning your response. This method receives a callback that returns the prop data. The callback will be executed in a separate request after the initial page render. Grouping requests. By default, all deferred props get fetched in one request after the initial page is rendered, but you can choose to fetch data in parallel by grouping props together. In the example above, the teams, projects, and task props will be fetched in one request, while the permission prop will be fetched in a separate request in parallel. Group names are arbitrary strings and can be anything you choose. So this is talking about this stuff right at the end. You can say, hey, all of these are a group, and we'll defer them all at the same time.
Sure.
Client side. On the client side, Inertia provides the deferred component to help you manage deferred props. This component will automatically wait for the specified deferred props to be available before rendering its children. Multiple deferred props. If you need to wait for multiple deferred props to become available, you can specify an array to the data prop.
Yeah.
Combining with once props, you may chain the once modifier onto a deferred prop to ensure the data is resolved only once and remembered by the client across subsequent navigations. For more information on once props, see the once props documentation.
Got it. What I'm thinking is, I think let's keep uh, rest of the things for the part two, I guess. What do you think? Because it's
Save which
already
things?
so rest of the things, whatever left, or maybe we can
Oh, yeah, that
complete.
works.
Yeah, because I guess it's already 2 hours, right? And I got bit quite in a sleep mode, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
not understanding what you are saying,
Yeah.
right? So I'm just forcing myself right now.
Yeah. No, we can
Maybe
totally wait. Save the rest of it for another one for sure.
got it. So maybe if you want to complete this page, I'm up, or if we can maybe start this merging props, or maybe even these all data things on the next stream.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll stop here at merging props and just save the rest of it for a second. Episode 2.
Yeah, got it.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay, it was nice. I learned quite things from the inertia. I hope I will remember those all things. What you most probably I will, because most of the things were
Mm-hmm.
interesting, and okay, I learned those things as well, and I was comparing it to how I do that in a live air, so I learned that quite. Also, did you remember that grammar error?
Oh, yeah. I think it was back in somewhere like installation or core concept. It might be in getting started somewhere up here. I'll try and go back and remember that. Put that PR in there.
Inertia understand.
That's what it was. Yeah. Somewhere
Okay.
in that. I wonder if we can search the docs. Yeah, I think it was right there. Should be understands how to handle it. Got it. So it's on the Wayfinder section.
You could
Cool.
click that, right?
Yeah, definitely should be able to.
Yeah. So just do PR whenever you get time.
Perfect.
Just fix that. Okay.
Easy stuff. Awesome. Yeah, definitely learned a lot myself. I mean, I use Inertia daily, so I should know all this stuff, but there's always stuff in the docs that you don't know. So very cool to read over it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Gotcha. Then this was all about the inertia talks to for the today. We will gonna do part two in future. I don't know when, but yeah, sooner I guess.
Mm-hmm. That
Okay,
works.
then yeah. So let me stop this thing. Thanks for joining, and maybe wait for. I mean, uh, be till the end, everyone.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks. Appreciate it.